Have you ever wanted to put together your own guitar amp? Well, there's a fantastic kit out there. It's called the Mod 102 from Mod Electronics, and it's basically got all of your tubes, resistors, capacitors, everything you need to put together an amp, hand wired, including a great instruction manual. So in this video, I'm going to be going through, it's going to be a long video, so you're going to get to see the entire process of putting together the amp. I don't really outline the steps too much. If you end up deciding to get the amp, you'll have the manual and you'll be able to go through those steps. But what I do highlight and what I do show in this video is the thought process that goes into some of the things you're going to need to know how to do in order to take on a project. On the Mod website, they rate this as a 5 difficulty on a scale of 1 to 5. So if you've got, some experience already with doing electronics and soldering, you can read a schematic, you can follow instructions, you can go through, steps to do a more complex project. Then this might be something you can take on. And this video should give you some insight into what that process looks like. Towards the end of the video, I'll give you some sound samples of the completed amp. I didn't have any issues when in my build that I wasn't able to work out during the build. So the first time I fired it up and turned it on, it worked great. But I do go over in the video, so you'll want to check out how I checked things at different steps in the process with like a multimeter, for example, to make sure that I was, moving along through the instructions successfully. And that's something that if you're putting together an amp like this, you don't want to just wing it and plug everything in. Even if you follow the steps perfectly, you still want to validate what you're doing when you're working on an amplifier. So it's going to be a long video, so if you want to kind of skip around, I'll add some chapter markers, and yeah, enjoy. Got some components and tubes that came with the kit here. The rest is just stuff on my workbench. So right now I'm on step 1, which is filing out the contacts to the chassis around the holes here, so there's a good connection for ground for any components that get mounted there. Finishing filing this off here. Just trying to make sure everything has a nice metallic surface on the inside. So just finishing off these smaller holes. So I did everything, all of the holes on the whole chassis, which is what the instruction says. It wasn't explicit it says each, but I'm going to assume it means all the chassis holes should have contact. The only place I didn't do filing was these side ones, because these are not for the electrical components. These are for the handles that'll end up going right there. Those ones probably not needed for, neither are the screw points for the cover, but every other hole on the chassis I filed out. Okay. So there's that side. I'm going to have to still go back and get those holes. Get the alignment of the sticker. It pretty much covers the whole chassis, so, or the front, that whole face. Couple millimeters of border. The tube socket's going to go on the top of the chassis. This is V1. This is V2. Both the tube sockets are the same. They're both 9 pins. It was a little tricky to get the screws in this, but it's all set now, so you can see pins 1 and 9 at the front. Okay, like that. Screws on top, and that's on bottom. Okay, so now I got that second tube socket down. This is V2, and the pins 1 and 9 are facing to the, I guess you'd say, the left side of the top. We got the handles on here now. Alright,
Alright, so we got here the 269EX power transformer, and the box has the description of how the center tap voltages are. So we got 115, and there's also 125, which is a gray wire on the primary winding. We're going to be clipping off the gray wire, it's not needed. And then we've got 380 volts and looks like 6.3 volts for the heater. So we're going to try to get this gray wire here as far down as we can so that it's not contacting the chassis or anything. Here it goes, like snipping a bomb. Is this the right wire? Alright. Got it pretty far down there. Okay. So we're going to pull, I twisted the green wire up, not sure if that matters, but and then the other power wires, just going to kind of pull through in a bundle, and it mounts right over the holes, like that. On May 10th, 2013, Lenny Paul Tracy. Alright, so I got the power transformer on, and now I'm mounting the output transformer, which is this little smaller guy. It's got one side with red and blue wires and one side with green and black wires. I'm just going to follow the drawing in terms of where to mount them. There's the red and the blue wires on the side you're looking at. And I just really want to tighten these screws down just because these transformers are heavier. Also, these are using the bigger screws. The little tiny screws are used for the tube sockets. So you'll see the smaller screws in the bag. There's 4 of them. Alright, so I've got the transformers mounted. You can see here the color of the wiring. We got the red and blue coming out here. We got the green and black coming out here. We got the 2 green wires from the power transformer for the filament heater right there. And we got the rest of the power wires. Alright, so I'm going to mount the jewel and some of the other components now to the front. I'm going to take this that nut off of this part here. Alright, just this part goes on the outside, and then I'm going to put that on the inside right here, and I got to put the nut back. So I got it like this so that the solder joints or solder leads right there are coming towards the bottom. So I just realized I forgot to cut out a hole for the input jack there, so I just did that now. And I got the lamp installed. The 1 meg's the volume pot, and it says in the guide it's these little tabs here. There's a tab right here. It prevents you from mounting it flush to the chassis. It says in the guide to bend these back. So I'm going to use some needle nose pliers and bend that back. It also mentions in the guide to spray contact cleaner in here, but these are nice smooth volume pots. They're alpha, and they're nice and smooth, so I'm not going to mess them up by putting contact cleaner in there at all, because that'll probably make them kind of rough. So they feel nice, they look like good pots. I'm just going to keep them and install them like that. So I've got the on-off switch and the pots on the front in there. It says the terminals for the on-off switch face up towards the top of the chassis, probably so that the on versus off action is correct. And the input jack, according to the picture, is going to be, you got 2 of them in the kit. One has 3 contacts, one has 2. We want the one with the 3 contacts for the input jack. We still got to do all the little terminal strips that come with the kit. Okay, so we've got all of the terminal strips mounted in there, like the drawing. I think the next steps are going to be putting some of the electrical components inside. Alright, so before I continue, remember earlier we filed out all of the holes in the chassis so that they had good electrical contacts not covered with paint. And so what I want to do here is I want to check using multimeter that there's continuity between all of the parts mounted to the chassis. So this one to another one that's mounted directly to the chassis goes to 0. That's good. That means there's no resistance, so there's continuity. I'm going to check all the other screws that are mounted directly to the chassis. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Here's the one that's mounted to the chassis. Okay. Looks like, just checking each one. Everything looks pretty good. Okay, so the fuse, I don't expect that to, because that fuse has a plastic housing. Doesn't look like my tube sockets have continuity. I'm not sure if the tube sockets really matter anyway. They're ceramic. Okay, so when looking at the filter caps that come in this set, they're electrolytic capacitors, and your negative side of the capacitor is going to be where the arrows are pointing. So in this case, the arrows are pointing to this lead up at the top. Okay, you got your notch down here at the bottom near the positive side, and the arrows pointing to the negative side. So we can see here we've got all the arrows in the drawing pointing to T1's terminal, which are jumped, and that matches the schematic as far as the negative side of each of the filter capacitors all being jumped together like that. So just something to be aware of is, as you're going through here, if you've got some basic understanding of the components in the schematic, to make sure that the way you understand you're connecting them via the schematic matches up with what you're seeing in the picture. I'm going to be checking this throughout the build just to make sure there's nothing wonky here. Obviously, I'd be real sad if any of these components popped because either I installed them incorrectly or the guide had them, the guide may have an error in it of some kind. So if I find anything that needs correction, I'll obviously make a note of it in this video. But yeah, definitely something to make sure you're doing rather than just plugging and playing each thing, is making sure you check your understanding against the drawing and the schematic. So that checks out. So I'm going to be moving forward with installing the filter caps and the rectifier circuit that is attached on these two terminal strips. So going forward with these, installing them, the leads are really longer than they need to be. So I'm just giving a little extra and going ahead and cutting. I cut about 1 inch off of this 47 microfarad cap, which still gives me plenty to work with, but it avoids feeling like I need to twist and bend the leads to get them in the terminals. You definitely don't want to do that because these are basically like paper clips, and the more you bend them back and forth, they will break. So the wire that comes in the kit, it's this like cloth covered wire. I don't have that great of insulation wire strippers, so I'm just kind of spinning it around inside of the wire stripper at first. Just kind of spinning it to get it sort of scored, and then after that, just using a pair of scissors to kind of finish the job. Not lightly cutting down, just sort of pulling it till it comes off. Oh, and then also, it says on the ground of the filter capacitors to use the white wire. So it's kind of hard to tell in the drawings. The grayish colored wires in the drawings are going to be the green ones, and the black colored ones is going to be the white wire. I'm trying to get these wires in here sort of snug around there, so when I go to solder them, there's some tension in place, so they don't move around too much. And just so I can see the component markings of the capacitors, I'm trying to kind of face them forward, but I got them all twisted in place. proceed here to begin soldering this section of the power circuit. So I get this kind of tedious. See why they charge a lot of money for hand-wired amps. I'm sure people have done this a few times, probably are better at it, but yeah, this is my first time doing this. Anything with like terminal strips. So this should be good. We'll go ahead and begin soldering. Alright, so I'm going to start with soldering here. I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing with the solder here and here. This is just terminal 1 connecting the ground of the filter caps. Okay, so if you've never soldered before, first of all, you want to get your solder gun nice and warm. You want to have it at least, running for 5 minutes. Maybe some solder guns are faster, but this one is the old school type. If you've soldered with it before, you should see some shiny solder on the tip. You can always test if it's hot by touching it to the solder, and you should see it melt right away. Okay? And you kind of got to get in here. What you're going to do is you're going to just a little, you're not going to burn them, but you're going to you just want to kind of touch the place you're about to solder and get all the different wires and leads and the terminal strip itself nice and warm, okay, by touching it to it. And then you're going to get a little bit of solder and put it on the tip, and you're just going to rest it there, and then you're going to feed it solder. If you do this right, you should get a nice and shiny and continuous solder connection. I'll show you those in a minute. I'm going to do the middle one now. Same thing. Get it nice and hot. And to get the leads hot. Well, not really hot, just warm, right? We're just warming them up so that they receive the solder well, and make sure you got plenty of feed to reach in there with your solder. Alright, get a little dab on the end, kind of gets the juices flowing, and then we're going to feed in the rest. You may notice there's a spot on your solder gun where it is warmer than the rest on the tip, so be familiar with where that spot is so you can use it. Alright, now I'm moving on to the next one. And this cloth wire may get too hot and burn, so be careful not to overexpose the cloth wire to the heat. Alright, again we're going to get a little bit on the tip, just a dab, and we're going to feed it. I don't think I got that wire, that last wire. Let's see, I'm going to try wiggling it. Okay, yeah, it's still moving, so it's not good. I got to get more solder in there basically. I'm going to try to push the cloth away so I have more room. I'm just going to go right for that wire. Same thing on the middle strip, although I need to feed out some more wire here. Okay. Okay, hopefully that's good. I see this other wire looks like it's not quite gotten a good connection either. Keep feeding it in till it just fills up. Maybe get some on the side. Okay. Let's see if those are tight and don't move. That one's tight. That one's tight. Alright, so I'm going to show you close up, as close as I can get. It's good and shiny. If you don't see shiny, if it looks brittle, you want to go back and redo it you want to have some kind of solder wick or something like this to pull up the old solder, and then just start over once it's as clean as you can get it. But that should be good. So we'll be moving forward with installing more components. So one of the things I'm doing here is, as I'm putting these components in, I'm bending the prongs a little bit forward after I'm cutting them and seeing where they need to be fit to the terminals, so that they kind of go in nicely and they'll face forward, so I can wrap them around. So I'm going to take that and just loop it up under where they go in here, getting it into place, a little bit of clearance, and then just crimping it kind of down with my finger. Oh, I put that into the wrong one. So actually I'm going to need to adjust the length on it some. So I'm going to use the pliers to kind of give this another bend. I don't want to break the leads off of the resistor, but I'm just going to shorten it by bending it at a different place. There we go. Get the other one in there. Okay, that's good. Now crimp it down, twisting it around. Okay, so we have most of the power circuit done, except we don't have the transformer wiring soldered to the terminals yet. I've got it all soldered. I'm going to do a continuity test, because if we're looking at the schematic, we want to make sure that all of these grounds are indeed connected. And you can see that the capacitor sides of the ground connect up to terminal 1. But the resistor, that 220K resistor right there, connects right here. So we want to make sure that we have continuity between these two chassis ground points. Yep, looks good. Alright, so I'm going to end up bending the pot leads down some, just so that they're easier to get to with the soldering iron. So I'm just going to bend them down just a hair, and that should be good. Alright, so next we're going to be wiring up the first the base pot with the 0.047 microfarad capacitor there, 6.8K resistor to ground, and the 0.1 microfarad capacitor there. Alright, so something else I noticed here in the guide is for the capacitors that go in the tone circuit, they say 0.022 microfarad, 0.047 microfarad, 0.1 microfarad. But the parts that come in the kit are marked differently. This one, you can see it says 473K on it. Now, it says here in the guide, alternate capacitance code 473K, which kind of worries me a little bit, just because 473K would be 0.47, not 0.047. Now, with the case of the 104 0.1 microfarad, that value makes sense in terms of assuming that K is kilofarads. I'm guessing maybe that's not what the K means. I'm, to be honest, not 100% sure. At least since it says the alternate capacitance code, that gives me some confidence I'm not just winging it with the closest value. Okay, so I've gotten the tone circuit wired up. You can see it up there near the pots. The next thing I'm going to do, I started wiring some of the resistors around the tube sockets, but a lot of the rest of this has some wiring. I'm going to actually have to go ahead and get some wires ready. So I'm going to get the wires ready next, because a lot of these, like as soon as you get them in kind of a good spot, if you want it to look clean, you want to be able to get everything in there and solder one terminal lead or one of these points at a time. When you're doing this, you also, I found, got to be careful to like not have the leads touch the edge of the pot. I'm kind of trying to keep some of the wiring away from like either other wires or the chassis itself, just kind of trying to keep some distance between components. One thing I'm noticing here is in the picture for the V1 socket pin 7 is it's got a green wire going to the volume pot, and it kind of looks like it's soldered to the case of the volume pot. But if you notice here in the section 5, it says connect the white wire from pin 7 of V1 to the volume pot's wiper lug. So I'm going to be connecting it not to the case, but to the wiper lug. But that is pretty hard to tell. I'm not sure if that's an error here or not, but it's hard to see that anything is actually from this wire here going to that wiper lug. So we'll see, and we're just going to follow the verbal instructions. It may be a good idea to get one of these solder suckers, just in case you have to take some solder back off. But right now, I'm seeing that one of the resistors in here, wired on the input jack, that I messed up and did not leave room for the lead that needs to go in it from the valve. Alright, that should be good. One suck of that gets the solder right out. I should be able to now get it in to a little bit of a hole I've got, hopefully. I need to move the resistor some, get to where the solder came out. Alright, now I was able to get that wire in through that hole up in the input jack. So go ahead and kind of move it away from where the guitar cable will come in. I'm going to use the pliers to get a little bit of bend around the corner. That way I can clip it easily when I'm done soldering it. I think that did it. So you want to make sure you're not getting any globs or anything. I'm going to just, maybe not. I'm not going to get any pliers in there to cut that, but I'm just going to crimp it so it's not visible and it's out of the way of the guitar cable coming through the jack. Alright, I'm soldering the components to terminal 4. Get them all positioned. I'm just going to warm it up and feed some solder in. There we go. That's what we got right now. Again, checking the schematics, making sure all of it makes sense. So this capacitor goes to ground. You see the ground right there where that nut is. One of the things I realize I'm going to need to do is on the tube socket, I've got pin 7 kind of crossing where it's not insulated from where I need to mount some components to pin 8. I'm going to have to move that. May have to desolder it. Hopefully I can just kind of gently nudge it out of the way. I'm going to have to get definitely enough clearance away from the resistor and capacitor leads that I'm going to have to mount there. I may need to loosen up the solder so I can kind of move it away from it. I was worried about this contact in the middle, but I don't think that actually is going to connect to anything. Let's see if I can just move it by loosening. Okay, let the solder harden. Alright, now I might have enough space to move around it. I'm just going to have to be real careful around these pins to make sure that I don't cross the streams, right? Don't cross the streams. So, alright, so I'm going to do a trick I've been using where I try to put just a dab of solder on a connection real quick to just sort of hold it into place for me. Ooh, I got hot quick. But it did give it a little more stability. Let's see if I can further do that. Oh shit, now it dropped in. That's okay. If it drops in like that, we'll just grab the component and gently with some, here we go. There we go. So I kind of got it up. One of the things I'm trying to do in this build is I'm trying to make it so all the components are readables, so you can see the values on them from the top. So yeah, I got that one sitting where I need it to go. It's out of the way of pin 7. I'm gonna have to still get in there to solder pin 8, and also I want to move that resistor a little bit now that it's somewhat secure as well. I want to want it to still be visible, but out of the way. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and solder this capacitor and resistor up in the terminal. Alright, so I'm going to start with the tube socket. I kind of have to, let's see, maybe I'll get in from this side, warm it up, just hold the solder gun there, and then I'm going to feed it in. Okay, should be good. Kind of moved there at the end, but it should be good. It's going to be tricky getting to those leads to trim them out, but I'll just have to work with it. Alright, I'm going to try to do this without upsetting everything, but that last solder joint I did should help this from, even if it gets loose, from moving around. So it's a little more stable from the top. Alright. Let's see, I'm just kind of looking into it, make sure everywhere where there's a component that it's got a 360 degree solder joint around it. Again, not trying to glob it, right? You want to be careful to not, I mean, it may take some practice if you haven't soldered before to kind of get that, knowing your solder iron and knowing its sweet spot, and so, you know, if it helps to practice on some other components or circuits where you can, you know, take things and melt them and fry them and resolder things over and over, it's probably a good idea. But a number of these, I haven't recorded it, but I've had to go back and kind of from multiple angles go around the thing, and I could see spots where certain parts of the lead weren't completely surrounded by solder, which might work for now, but down the road, if it loosens up, that's just a problem waiting to happen with a component that could get loose. So, you know, after kind of everything's in place, I've tried to go around a little bit, and as best I can get the solder in there. There's a couple spots where I'm still not super happy with what I was able to do. Part of it is the transformer weight. I may need to get some way I can like hold this down. Matter of fact, I'm going to try to do this now by holding this right here. This is one of the joints that yeah, just sometimes even gravity can help. So, and then I'll try to just dab some solder. I can only do this with one hand, but this one's tough because I got a diode right next to it, and I don't want to melt the diode holding the gun there for too long. You know, without having a hand to feed solder, it can be very tricky. Sometimes it's not even doing anything when you just hold the iron to it, which can cause you to be tempted to melt components, which you don't want to do. So you just got to be super patient. It's better than it was. It didn't melt the diode. I'm going to kind of go with that for now. Here's where I was working, was right there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's the other side of this terminal right there where the resistor and the diodes meet. And on the bottom side of it just didn't have good contact. Alright, so I clipped pin 8's leads, and I've got a good amount of clearance now from pin 7 and 9. I'm just going to go ahead and, now that I got those leads sorted out, I'm going to just do a little bit more solder around the edge of the leads. And here's what it looks like up close. So V1, pin 7, 8, 9 in the wiring. Get all the leads out of there. Alright, so here's where we're at now. Yeah, it was tricky getting the tube socket pins all good. I had to use my little mini file to kind of make sure I had a good amount of space between each of the pin sockets when I was all done setting the wires. But you do got to move these wires around quite a bit just to get a good angle in there with the solder gun, and you got to use needle nose pliers a lot to kind of move things around very gently. So easy does it with getting those set up, but all in all, I think our tube socket looks pretty good. So I'm going to move on with wiring up V2. Something here to note, I forget if I mentioned this or not already, but in the instructions you can see that the resistor on the input jack, one side of it goes to both of those two pins. So there's also something similar in the V2 that I just noticed. So pay special attention if you see something like this where the wire goes between two pins. In this case, it's hard to tell, is it both the resistor and the capacitor, or just one or the other? So it says, step 4, connect the 200 ohm resistor to V2 pin 3, but do not solder connection yet. And then it says connect the 100 microfarad capacitor with negative end to both pin 3 and pin 4. So in this case, we want to have the capacitor go to both pin 3 and 4, but not the resistor. It's just something you'll definitely want to pay attention to, is little details like that. Alright, anytime I see something a little screwy in the drawing, I just make sure I double check the steps and they're a little more clear. So far though, the wiring guide and all the drawings have been really great and helpful, so I haven't had any issues yet. On the V2 wiring, there's another opportunity to, in addition to checking the text, checking the schematic here. So if we want to verify that, we've got V2 right here. We got our 200 ohm resistor right here, and where's the capacitor? Where'd you go? Oh, I've already got them on there. The capacitor, those are both connected to ground on one end in parallel, and then, you know, I don't actually see pin 4 on the yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so pin 4 doesn't appear to be in the schematic. I'm not sure exactly why they suggest doing that, but we're just going to go with what it said in the instructions. So but otherwise, other than the pin 3, 4 piece, they're in parallel. And in fact, since one of them's jumping pin 3 and 4, they're technically both connected to pin 3 and 4 anyway. So this capacitor and resistor on V2 are really tricky to try to weave through those two pins. So I've got a file stuck into pin 4 to kind of wedge it in there, trying to weave them through the best I can, but yeah, that's pretty tricky. So I've got them right where I need them. Let's see if I can get some solder on here. Make sure there's plenty, because they're really not through the pins very much, if at all. Let's see if I can get my solder iron out of there now, or my file. It looks like I soldered my file to it. Alright, get a little more on pin 4. And I'm trying to get this resistor not too close to this capacitor and kind of not too close to anything else, because this resistor is probably going to get fairly hot. Since it's a 5-watt resistor. Something else I didn't mention earlier as well, but just if it's not obvious, the larger resistors are the 1 watt. These smaller ones this, or the 1/2 watt. So towards the end on V2 there's a 220k resistor. If you are doing this also and you wired the small 220k, sorry I wasn't holding the 220k, which is a red, yellow, gold, if you've got the small one in the power circuit, you need to take that out. The 1/2 watt is supposed to go in V2. The 1 watt, the bigger one, is supposed to go in the power supply. Okay, so V2 is done. There's only the 4 pins that it's going to use. So got the resistor, big resistor, the capacitor, and the medium resistor, I guess you'd say. Getting ready to wire the output jack transformer, or the output jack to the output of the output transformer. A lot of output in there. So this black and green wire, you want to make sure you twist them up. I don't think I'm going to trim them any. There's plenty of space in there. I don't expect there will be much interference, so I'm just going to go with that length. Green goes to the ground, which the ground you can tell either by the drawing in the manual or the fact that the ground will always go to the sleeve of the cable, the connector. So if you see which one is connected to the center of the jack, that's the ground, that's the green wire. Let's see, take a closer look. Yep, looks good. Found the little solder balls. You drop any, they kind of stick to the case pretty good, so make sure you knock any of those out so they don't end up floating around inside your amp. So now we're moving on to TR1. That's the power transformer. Connect the black wire from transformer 1 to the fuse holder's outer solder lug. Prop this lug slightly away from the fuse holder's plastic body and plan for a little slack before cutting. So this one here, definitely I'm going to want to cut. It's very long. This connects to the fuse. It says prop this lug slightly away from the fuse holder's plastic body. Let's see, can I bend it out? Yeah, it looks like I can. Okay, so I was able to bend this fuse, bend that right there out some. It was flush against there, but that's much better not having it right next to the plastic. See if I can get this in my, maybe I should have given it some more slack. I'm just going to gently try to work around without cutting through the wire. Worst case scenario, I'll use my teeth, which I don't like having to do sometimes, so it works. It does that. That doesn't seem to be working that great. Let's see if I can do it with scissors. That seems like I got it. There we go. Got a little tiny bit. Alright, so black wire to the fuse outer solder lug. So I'm just going to put that guy right through there and kind of flatten it over the top. And then I'm going to solder it to it. Okay, heat it up a little bit real quick since it's plastic. Okay, that looks pretty good. Alright, so it says install the grommet with the 1/4 inch center and rear chassis hole. Gently insert the power cord through this grommet hole until at least 18 inches are through. Wow, that's a lot of... Alright, we'll go for it. Through. Tie a knot at the end of the cord. Ah, that's why it wants us to give us some extra, so we can tie a knot to prevent damage to the internals. I'll tie a knot at the end of the cord so that an inch of black outside insulation extends past the knot. Pull the knot as tight as possible by hand. So I did end up having to flip over. I didn't have to totally remove it, but I did have to flip over the power switch. So I got the terminals there. It's a little unclear if it matters at all which lead. Well, it's a little unclear which lead to wire the transformer's white wire and the power cable's white wire too on the power switch. However, I'm just going to do a continuity test real quick to check if there's really any difference. So I expect when it's open, when the switch is in the off position, there'll be infinite resistance and zero resistance when it's in the other position. And that's exactly what I see. Sorry, I got the multimeter out of view, but yeah, when it's in the on position, there's no resistance, so it really should not matter one bit which wire you actually wire it to. I had forgot to leave a little room in one of these lugs, so I ended up having to wire this red wire from the output transformer to kind of just to the surface, which isn't ideal, but I managed to get a good connection. Alright, so there's one white wire, and then my other white wire is from the power wire. That one I'm not going to need as much slack. I'm also going to run it behind these other wires. Now those two should be good to solder. Notice how I'm soldering from the opposite side I'm holding the iron. That's usually a good way to do it if you can, because you know if the solder is melting from the opposite side that you're applying the solder to, that the entire thing you're heating up is nice and warm, which is what you want for a good solder joint. Sometimes, by the way, it's a good idea with these bare threaded wires, just give them a little solder on them so they'll kind of, it'll absorb it. It'll kind of turn silver. This will help it stay together when you're trying to push it through. Doing the fuse holder right now. And this might take longer to warm up because it's a thicker post on the fuse holder. Didn't get enough solder on there. Or it's still just very warm. Oh, that's what it is. It just stayed warmer longer. It finally cooled off and froze in place. Got the green wire from the power cord, and then the red and yellow wire, that one with the yellow stripe from the transformer, to lug 1 on this terminal. That's the ground. So this is the ground of the home, and this is the center tap for the power transformer. So these two red ones, this is the hot voltage from the power transformer. It's going to go to the anode sides of the diodes, and wire that up right now. One of the things I forgot to mention is this thing that goes on top of the EL84 V2 socket. I took it off. I mean, I'm obviously going to put it back on when I'm all done, but this thing was just getting thrashed under the bottom, so that's probably a good idea to take it off. Alright, so I've got the power wires, transformer wires all done. I'm going to have to go through and now the last step basically is going to be the tube power supply wires run to the tube sockets, and the filament wires that'll also run to the tube sockets. These last connections are basically going to connect the power supply down here to the amplifier circuit. So you got B1 and B2. B2 goes to the tubes. So you can see this is the 12AX7 here. It's split into two, right? So this is V1 and V1. It's just it's like there's two preamps in there, and then V2. So B2 needs to go to pin 9 and pin 1 and 6 for the 12AX7. So I'm just checking to make sure that what I'm going to wire from the description matches the schematic. In terms of the schematic, so at the end of the power supply we got B2. That's the last one that drops over this 22K resistor. 178 volts is what it is. We can say B2 up here. We can see B2, where is it? Right here. Alright, so the first B2 goes through a 100K resistor to both pin 1 and pin 6 of V1. And then B2 also goes through a 1K resistor to pin 9 of V2. So here's how that's actually happening inside of this circuit here. So right here is B2. This isn't powered on, so don't worry. B2's right here. It jumps over to this terminal, which then connects to the next post next to it, which is jumped over to pin 1 of V1. So that right there is this 100K resistors right here. And then it's jumped. Alright, and then our second 100K resistor is going to be, so now it's jumping also this way to this terminal, and I'm going to kind of switch gears and show that what's immediately obvious is this big 1 watt resistor going to pin 9. So that's for V2 right here. And then this is also jumped over here, which here's your 1K resistor that's then jumped to pin, looks like in here that will be pin 6, which is what we see here, pin 6. So it all looks good. Just checking to make sure that what I'm doing following the drawings matches the schematic. So here's B1. B1 goes from the red of the output transformer to just before the 22K resistor. So here's the red output transformer wire. As you can see, that goes to the terminal that's right before this 22K ohm resistor under the or above the filter caps. So that also checks out. Now it's just to do the filament wiring. By the way, I just noticed that the instructions say use white wire for the power, the tube powers. I used green. It's not really going to make any difference. They're both the same gauge and everything else. So it looked like the green gray wires in the pictures, so I just went with green, which to me makes sense actually, because we're for the most part in here using white for grounds, at least there on the filter caps. Alright, so I got these filament wires twisted up. There's going to be another shorter set of them going from V2 to V1. But I'm going to have to suck some solder out of pin 4 V2 because I need a hole to put this filament wire in. So I'm going to get it hot and then suck it. Yeah, not enough. Let's try again. There we go. Going with white wire for the filament, even though it says use green, just because I already used green for the tube power. So the filament's going to get the white wire. One thing to point out though is that when we're taking these jumps from pins 4 and 5 of V2, they're going to go to, one of the wires is going to go to pin 4 and 5 of V1, and the other one's going to go to pin 9. So we're going to kind of have to do one of those things here where we basically, take this and put it through both 4 and 5. Okay, so I got all the wiring done. All the filament wiring's in there. Pretty sure it's all done. It was a little tricky. I took a couple liberties where one of the filament wires, rather than trying to get it in 4, which is already really busy, I just used pin 3 because pin 3 is jumped to pin 4 already. What I want to do now is I want to go through and check for short circuits. So I'm going to check for short circuits at the AC input. I'm going to check for short circuits at the DC output. I'm going to check for short circuits on the speaker output as well. Just want to make sure at all these points there's no short circuits, which a short circuit would be zero resistance. So for example, here we're going to take the power wire, the white and the green, and make sure there's no short circuit with them, which I think right here. So there's the green is the ground. I think it's good. Okay, now on the output, that would be B2 or B1, which is right here and right here, against the chassis ground. Make sure there's no short circuit, but that's good. No short there. And then across the output. So here we do have what may be a short or may just be the impedance of the amp. So here at the output there is a short somehow, or it's kind of oscillating through. So that output is coming from the output of the power transformer, unless there's a short inside the transformer, which I doubt. I'm just going to check the input to the power transformer, which is the blue wire and the red wire, which is right here. So there's 222 ohms of resistance there, so that's good. So no shorts. I don't think there's a short. This is just the output transformer winding, which has an impedance, but let's see. I really don't think it's shorted. I mean, there's not really many places for that to be shorted, so that's probably okay. All right. So with all that checked out and all the visual inspections I've done so far going through it, I think it's going to be safe to plug in. Make sure we don't see smoke. I'm going to make sure we have it hooked up to a cab. So I'm going to go ahead and get a guitar, get a cab. Okay, so the last things are going to be put the fuse in, if you haven't already, into the fuse holder, and then put the tubes in. So V1 is going to be the 12AX7, which is the one closest to the front of the amp. If it says EC83, that's fine, that's a 12AX7. And then the EL84 is what goes in the back. So just gently, snugly push it in. I'm going to have to get this holder thing kind of straightened out because it got all wonky. Okay, there we go. The L84 is the taller, skinnier tube. And this guy's going to be the power tube. Alright, you just line up the pins will have a gap in them, so that goes where the gap in the socket is. Can't mess it up really unless you just force it without even looking. Clip it in place. Moment of truth. I'm going to go ahead and plug it into a guitar. And then I'll leave the power in the off position. I've got this little 8-inch orange cab. So it's perfect for this. You want to make sure you have an 8-ohm speaker, whatever you plug it into. Make sure it's plugged in. And plug in the power. Okay, no smoke yet. Let's see what happens when we turn it on. We got a light. We'll let the tubes warm up. I see the EL84 starting to glow. Oh, there we go.
Oh yeah?
We got sound. Cool. See with the bass all the way down, the treble all the way down. The treble all the way up. Bass. See if we can get some overdrive. Turn the bass down. Cool. So I'm going to now put it together and put the feet on, close up the cab. Okay, so one of the things I did with this amp is I ordered some kind of bigger feet than it comes with. They're called sound addicted feet, and they're about as thick as a finger, maybe a little more, because I needed them to get over the height of the cab I got, because I want to set it on the top of that cab. So you can order those on Amazon along with the orange cab, and basically I'm just going to figure out where these feet need to go on here so that I can set them on the amp. So here it is. It's all done. So now I'm going to give you some audio samples that I've recorded with a Audio-Technica AT2020 condenser mic. So if you made it this far to the end of the video, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed watching this and you'd like to see more content from me, give the video a thumbs up. In the future I'll be doing perhaps additional amp builds, but also some stuff with music theory, education, maybe some reviews of my own personal gear, and song demos, things like that. So thanks again.